The plea. The rations line had not moved in over an hour. Mira shifted Eli on her hip, her son's thin arms looped loosely around her neck. His breath came shallow, his head tucked against her shoulder as though the effort of holding it up was too much. The other refugees in line cast furtive glances at him, then away again, each guarding their own despair. The Chirath guards clattered past, their chitinous armor gleaming in the sun, mandibles clicking as they barked orders none of the humans understood. Mira did not look at them. If she did, they might notice her. If they noticed her, they might notice Eli. And then, she pushed the thought aside. When at last her turn came, she stepped forward to the crude table where a Chirath quartermaster loomed. Its multifaceted eyes reflected her gaunt frame back at her 100 times. It placed a meager sack on the table, weighed it once in a clawed hand, and set it down as if bestowing an unworthy gift. "That is not enough," Mira said softly. The guard's mandibles twitched. "All calculations correct. Human sustenance portion, standard issue." Its voice carried the cold metallic hum of a translator device. Mira drew Eli's face closer to hers. "Please," she whispered. "Please, just let me stay. I don't eat much. Just nourish my child." The quartermaster's antennae angled back, signaling impatience. Excessive requests recorded. Human female inefficient. Additional food allocation denied. Eli stirred at the sound of the words, a faint whimper slipping from his cracked lips. Mira pressed her cheek to his hair, swallowing the knot in her throat. She wanted to beg again, to fall to her knees if she had to, but she knew the Chirath would only grow amused, perhaps even crueler. Behind her, someone muttered, "Don't push it." The line of refugees shifted uncomfortably, their silence heavy. Each of them had children, or elders, or broken bodies to feed. No one could afford her defiance. The sack of rations hit the dirt at her feet. A guard shoved her aside with the butt of a spear, sending her stumbling back into the dust. Mira caught herself, clutching Eli tight, and bent to grab the sack before someone else could. She staggered away, pulse hammering in her ears. She walked until she reached the edge of the camp, where rusted shipping crates had been dragged into crude shelters. Dropping the sack on the ground, she pried it open, a handful of nutrient wafers, pressed hard and tasteless. Enough for one, barely two, if rationed carefully. Eli's lips trembled. "Mama, hungry." Her throat tightened. "I know, love. I know." She broke off half a wafer and pressed it into his hand. She took nothing for herself. As the boy nibbled weakly, Mira turned her face toward the distant fence where the Chirath watched with weapons ready. She hated them, their indifference, their calculations. To them, Eli was just another mouth, an inefficient number in a ledger. But to her, he was the whole of the universe. The scrape of soft footsteps drew her attention. Mira tensed, pulling Eli close. From behind a crate emerged a slender figure, an alien, but not Chirath. Amphibian-like, skin smooth and mottled green, large eyes glistening with something like sympathy. She carried a small cloth bundle. "I saw," the stranger said, her voice lilting and accented, yet clear. "They are cruel to your kind." Mira's body went rigid. "Go away. If they see you here." The alien shook her head quickly. She crouched and placed the bundle on the ground, pushing it toward Mira. Inside lay scraps of bread, a sliver of dried fruit, and a flask of water. "Take it," the alien urged. "Your child needs more than wafers." Mira's hands trembled as she looked from the bundle to Eli, who was already staring at the food with wide, hollow eyes. Slowly, she reached out, lifting the fruit to her son's lips. He bit down, and for the first time in days, a spark of life returned to his eyes. Tears blurred Mira's vision. She whispered, "Why?" The alien glanced toward the Chirath sentries. Her voice dropped. "Because you gave up your share. I have never seen that before. Among my people, no one would. You humans, you are strange." Mira tightened her grip on Eli, rocking him gently. "Not strange. Just a mother's." The alien studied her for a long moment, then nodded as if something inside her had shifted. "Perhaps that is what will save you." She slipped back into the shadows, leaving Mira with food, with Eli, and with a thought she could not shake. Perhaps humanity's weakness was not weakness at all. Sparks of defiance. The camp stank of rust and desperation. The Chirath did not care how the refugees lived so long as they did not die too quickly. Efficiency demanded bodies strong enough to labor, but not strong enough to resist. Mira learned quickly that she could not rely on the ration line. Each day she watched others stumble away empty-handed, beaten or ignored. If Eli was to live, she would have to find other ways. At dawn, while the guards patrolled the opposite side of the fence, she scavenged among the discarded supply crates. Broken packaging still carried crumbs of nutrient paste, enough to smear on Eli's lips. She gathered weeds growing along the ditch, crushing them between stones to test for bitterness. Some were poisonous, some barely edible. A few, boiled into a thin broth, gave her boy the strength to stand. Other humans began to notice. A hollow-eyed father crouched beside her one evening, watching as she boiled the broth in a dented tin. "How do you know what's safe?" he whispered. "I don't," Mira admitted. "But I test it. Small bites first. If I live, I give it to Eli." He stared at her with something like shame. "You risk yourself so he can eat." Mira's gaze never left the bubbling water. "Of course. What else is there?" Word spread quickly. Soon she was teaching others the weeds to avoid, how to line crates with ash to trap warmth at night, how to scrape condensation from the metal walls of storage tanks for water. Knowledge shared in whispers, passed from family to family, until survival itself seemed a secret rebellion. The Chirath noticed. One morning, as Mira knelt with Eli beside a fire pit, a shadow fell across her. She looked up into the gleaming eyes of a Chirath enforcer. Its spear but slammed into the ground inches from her hand. "You instruct others," the translator buzzed. "Unauthorized. Humans will not disseminate techniques." Mira's heart pounded. Around her, the other refugees melted away, leaving her exposed. Eli clutched her arm, eyes wide. "I only want them to live," she said. The guard struck her across the face with the flat of its spear. Mira fell hard into the dirt, the taste of blood flooding her mouth. Eli cried out. "You will cease," the Chirath hissed. "Efficiency requires compliance. Disobedience is waste." Mira curled around her son as the guard raised its weapon again. But before the blow fell, another voice cut through the air. "Stop!" It was Sira, the amphibian aide who had once brought food. She darted forward, webbed hands raised. "This human is no threat. She instructs only in scraps and weeds. Such knowledge does not diminish your stores." The guard's antennae twitched. For a long moment it seemed ready to strike her as well. Then it lowered its spear with a hiss of displeasure. "You waste words, lesser one." Interference noted. With a final shove of its spear against Mira's shoulder, it stalked away. Mira sat trembling, holding Eli close. Sira knelt beside her, eyes luminous with fear. "You cannot keep teaching them so openly. They will kill you." "I can't stop," Mira rasped. "If I do, children die. You saw what they planned for us, slow starvation." Sira's gaze flicked toward the Chirath watchtower. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "There are supplies hidden. Food, medicine, meant for them alone. If I could bring you—" she broke off, shaking her head. "No. Too dangerous." Mira caught her hand. "Not for me. For all of us. You said it yourself, humans are strange. Maybe that strangeness can save more than just us." Sira studied her face, seeing the blood on her cheek, the fierce light in her eyes. Slowly, she nodded. "Tonight, when the guards change shift, I will show you." That night, when Eli was asleep, Mira followed Sira through the shadows. They crept between rusted containers until they reached a locked storage shed. Sira produced a stolen access chip and pressed it against the panel. With a hiss, the door slid open. Inside were shelves stacked high with ration packs, water filters, even crates of fruit sealed in preservation foam. Enough to keep the entire camp alive for months. Mira's breath caught in her throat. "Take some," Sira urged. "But hide it. If they discover—" Mira shook her head. Her hand tightened on the nearest crate. "Not just for me. Not just for Eli. This has to go to everyone. Mira stared at her in disbelief. You'll be caught. You'll die. Mira looked back at the sleeping camp, shadows curled around fires, children huddled in their mother's arms. Her voice was low, steady. Better I die giving them hope than live taking more than my share. For the first time, Mira felt a shiver of awe. The human woman was no longer just a mother clinging to her child. She was something else now, something larger. A spark. And sparks, Mira realized, could spread into flames. The mother who wouldn't bend. The days that followed were taut with danger. Mira and Mira worked in silence, moving like shadows between storage sheds, slipping packets of food and filters into the hands of those who trusted them. No one spoke aloud of what was happening, yet the changes rippled through the camp. Refugees who had once sat hollow-eyed in despair began to straighten their backs. Children no longer whimpered with hunger at night. Small fires flickered brighter, and whispers followed Mira wherever she walked. She hated the whispers. She was no leader, no hero. She was just a mother trying to keep her boy alive. And yet, each time someone clasped her hand in gratitude, she felt the truth pressing in. She could no longer think only of Eli. It came to a head one gray morning. A Chirath patrol stormed through the camp, dragging crates of food behind them. Mira watched from the shadows as they dropped the crates at the center of the yard and began calling out names from a datapad. Only the strongest and youngest were summoned forward. Those deemed inefficient, the elderly, the sick, the children, were shoved aside. When one mother cried out as they pushed her daughter away, a guard struck her down with its spear. The child screamed, scrambling to her mother's side. Mira's legs moved before her mind caught up. She shoved through the crowd and planted herself between the Chirath and the girl. Enough! The guard loomed over her, towering, armored plates gleaming. Human interference. Recorded. Stand down. No, Mira said, her voice hoarse but steady. She spread her arms wide, shielding the girl and her sobbing mother. If survival must be rationed, then ration me first. Take me, starve me, kill me if you must, but leave the children. A hush fell over the yard. Hundreds of eyes fixed on her. Refugees of a dozen species watched as one small human woman defied a creature twice her size. The Chirath tilted its head, clicking in disbelief. Illogical. You value others above yourself. Mira lifted her chin. That's what it means to be human. For a moment, the guard seemed frozen. Then, with a hiss, it shoved her to the ground and moved on, striking no one else. The crowd stirred, whispers swelling into something larger. She stood for them. She faced them down. She doesn't bend. Mira lay gasping in the dirt, Eli's small hands tugging at her arm. Around her, eyes met hers with new intensity, not just gratitude, but hope. A dangerous, fragile hope. That night, Mira came to her shelter, face pale. Do you understand what you've done? I made them stop. Mira pressed a cloth to the bruise blossoming across her ribs. You made yourself a symbol, Mira whispered. Symbols cannot hide. The Chirath will not ignore you forever. Mira looked at Eli, curled up asleep, his chest rising and falling with precious steadiness. She touched his hair, smoothing it back from his forehead. Then let them look. Let them see what it means to fight for something more than yourself. Mira hesitated, then sat beside her. You are changing them, all of them, even those who are not human. They whisper of you in their own tongues. Whispering won't keep anyone alive, Mira said softly. But maybe action will. It was Mira who brought her the news a day later. The Chirath were planning a purge. Too many refugees, they claimed, too many inefficient units. They would begin with the weakest, elders and children. The words hit Mira like a blade. She sat frozen as Mira spoke, her mind filling with the image of Eli's face pale and still, his small body left in the dust. No, Mira whispered. Not him. Not anyone. Mira's voice shook. You cannot stop them. You saw their power. Mira rose slowly to her feet. Power isn't the same as will. They think we are broken. They think we'll accept whatever they decide. But if we stand together, she clenched her fists. If we fight, we can make them choke on their efficiency. Sira stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Not just a mother, not just a spark, but a fire. You would lead them. Mira's gaze swept across the camp, where families huddled close, waiting for whatever fate the Chirath decreed. She thought of Eli, of the little girl she had shielded, of every wasted body that had fallen in silence. I don't want to lead, she said quietly. But if that's what it takes to save them, then I will. The whispers in the camp grew louder in the days that followed. No longer gratitude alone, but anticipation. A current of defiance began to ripple, drawn to Mira as though she were the only solid stone in a shifting river. The Chirath still saw her as insignificant. But soon, they would learn the truth. This mother would not bend. Humanity's fire. The night before the purge, the camp was silent. Not the silence of sleep, but of dread. Families huddled close, eyes wide in the darkness, waiting for the sound of Chirath boots. Mira sat with Eli curled against her side, her arms wrapped tightly around him. Sira crouched nearby, her webbed hands restless. It will happen at dawn, she whispered. They will take the children first. Mira closed her eyes. She had known it since the moment Sira told her. But knowing and accepting were not the same. She would not accept. They think we're weak, Mira murmured. They think we'll kneel. But tomorrow, they'll see what it means to be human. Sira's throat tightened. If you do this, there will be no turning back. Mira looked at her son. His breath was warm against her arm, fragile but steady. There's no turning back already. At dawn, the Chirath came. Armor gleaming in the thin light, weapons humming, they marched into the yard where the refugees were corralled. The commander's translator rasped, "Inefficient units will be processed. All others, comply." A hush fell. No one moved. Fear pressed heavy over the crowd. Then Mira stepped forward. She lifted Eli into her arms and faced the commander head-on. No. The single word cracked through the silence. Refugees stared, breath caught. The commander tilted his head, mandibles clicking. Clarify. You will not take our children, Mira said, her voice shaking but loud. You will not decide who deserves to live. Not anymore. The commander's antennae twitched in amusement. Human defiance. Predictable. Futile. Mira's heart pounded, but she stood her ground. Around her, others began to rise. Humans, yes, but also the amphibian Sira's kin, and even the feathered of Rel who had always kept to themselves. One by one, they stepped closer, forming a wall of bodies behind her. We are not efficient, Mira said. We are alive. And we will fight for every breath. The commander raised his spear to strike her down. Before the blow could fall, a stone flew from the crowd, shattering against his armor. Then another. Then a makeshift spear of sharpened metal. The yard erupted. Refugees surged forward, screaming, brandishing anything they could find, rusted pipes, broken boards, bare fists. The Chirath guard struck back, but for the first time they faced not cowering refugees, but a tide of furious, desperate beings with nothing left to lose. Mira ducked low, clutching Eli close as she wove through the chaos. She reached the storage shed Sira had shown her, where crates of food and water were kept. With a sharp kick, she knocked open the lock. Here, she cried. Supplies. Take them. Hands swarmed the crates, hurling food into the crowd. Even as the battle raged, laughter rose, raw, disbelieving laughter at the taste of stolen freedom. Sira appeared at Mira's side, wielding a stolen Chirath sidearm. The commander is heading for the tower, she shouted. Mira handed Eli to a woman she trusted, then chased after Sira. They scrambled up the rickety scaffolding of the watchtower. At the top, the Chirath commander stood, antennae flaring as he barked orders into a communicator. Mira's blood ran hot. If he called reinforcements, the uprising would be crushed before it began. She grabbed a length of pipe and swung with all her strength. The commander reeled, his communicator clattering across the platform. He turned on her, mandibles snapping. You are illogical, he hissed. Sacrifice of self diminishes survival. Mira's breath came ragged. She met his gleaming eyes. No. Sacrifice of self ensures survival. For the ones who come after. With a final heave, She rammed the pipe into the support struts of the tower. Metal groaned, then snapped. The platform tilted, collapsing in a storm of dust and shrieking metal. Mira and Sira leapt clear as the tower crashed down, burying the commander beneath. By the time the dust settled, the Chirath guards were retreating, overwhelmed by sheer numbers and fury. Refugees clung to one another, bloodied but alive. Mira staggered back to where she had left Eli. He ran into her arms, clinging tight. Tears blurred her vision as she pressed her face into his hair. "You're safe, my love. You're safe." Around her, the camp was no longer silent. Voices rose together, ragged but strong. They had fought. They had survived. Sira stood nearby, her eyes wide with something close to reverence. "You lit the fire," she whispered. Mira shook her head, clutching Eli close. "I just asked for my child to live. The fire was already here." That night, as the refugees shared food beneath the stars, Eli leaned against her shoulder, drifting toward sleep. Mira held him close, whispering the words she had once spoken in desperation, now filled with quiet triumph. "I don't eat much. Just nourish my child." And this time, it was not a plea. It was a promise that humanity would endure.